The barn was quiet. The storm raged. Miles away from the only home he ever knew, Cooper, a dog no one expected to see again, suddenly stood up. No sound had called him. No scent had reached him. And yet something pulled at his soul, like an invisible tether. He ran. He ran through mud, through thunder, through fear. And by the time anyone realized what he had done, 2 lives had already been saved. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you are from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move, you please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Clearwater Ridge, Oregon. Early autumn. Overcast skies, light breeze. The first wisps of October wind carried the scent of rain through the sleepy town of Clearwater Ridge, nestled beneath pine-draped hills, and dotted with white-fenced homes that looked as if they had grown straight out of the soil. The skies above were a dull pewter swollen with the promise of drizzle, and the sidewalk shimmered faintly with the residue of an earlier morning mist. Leaves, gold and russet, tumbled across cracked asphalt and settled against worn porch steps. In this quiet corner of the world, the story of a golden-hearted soul was gently unfolding in silence. Cooper, a 6-year-old golden retriever with a thick coat of sun-kissed fur and deep honey-brown eyes, lay beneath the wooden beams of an old barn. His large paws rested atop one another as he watched the fields sway in the wind. Cooper was no ordinary dog. He had once been a therapy companion for pediatric patients trained to sense anxiety and soothe children with nothing but his presence. His gait was elegant, his eyes soft and intelligent, and there was an almost human sorrow in the way he lowered his head when he missed someone. That someone more than anyone else was Laura. Laura Jennings. 32 had the quiet strength of a woman who'd known struggle and worn it like a second skin. Tall, willowy, and often dressed in practical scrubs and a ponytail, she radiated a composed warmth that came more from habit than ease. Her gentle smile could calm a patient's panic, but behind it lived a persistent fatigue. Years ago, a failed marriage and the sudden passing of her younger sister had left Laura as the sole guardian to her baby nephew for a time, a trial that left a scar of grief that never quite faded. It taught her to keep moving to survive through structure and routine. When she adopted Cooper 4 years ago from a rescue center, he had been a trembling mess. But together they had healed until life shifted again. The arrival of baby Eli changed everything. Eli had been born premature, with weeks spent in the neonatal ICU. Though he survived, the sleepless months that followed took their toll on Laura. Between double shifts at Clearwater Ridge Medical and nighttime feedings, Cooper had quietly become an afterthought. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. A crying baby, a full-time job, no partner to share the weight the arithmetic never added up. "I'm so sorry." Boy Laura had whispered that morning, kneeling beside Cooper with a leash in one hand and a packed duffel in the other. The duffel was his favorite chew toy blanket bowl. Cooper had tilted his head-tail, wagging weakly, sensing something was changing. His ears perked when Laura's voice cracked. "Just for a little while. Uncle Dennis's place. He's got space. I'll come get you soon." Dennis, Laura's uncle, was a grizzled man of 72, with silver hair and a voice like gravel. A retired machinist with thick hands and a crooked nose from a bar brawl decades back, he wasn't the warmest man, but he meant well. He lived just outside town in a weather-worn farmhouse surrounded by rows of pine and a small apple orchard left mostly wild. Cooper had his own corner in the barn, fresh water, and the run of the fields. It wasn't home, but it was something. Quiet dog, that one, Dennis muttered to no one in particular on most days. He fed Cooper on time, let him out at sunrise, and patted his head without much affection. To Dennis, dogs were animals, not children. But even he couldn't deny that Cooper had something different in him, something noble. One morning, just a week after his arrival, Cooper had wandered near the edge of the barn and discovered a small creature, trembling beneath a stack of old firewood. A squirrel no more than a few weeks old, its fur-damp eyes wide, one tiny leg twisted at an odd angle. It should have been prey. But Cooper crouched low, tail still ears forward. He crept close, nudged the creature gently with his nose, then lay beside it, keeping it warm through the cold morning breeze. Dennis had watched from the porch, arms crossed. "Huh," he grunted, watching the dog lick the squirrel's head gently, the little thing quivering, but alive. Well, I'll be damned. The squirrel over time healed. Dennis fed it pieces of apple and oats. It would sit on the fence post near Cooper's favorite nap spot, almost like a tiny shadow. Cooper never chased it. They simply existed together, a quiet bond born of instinct and kindness. Yet even in that peace, Cooper's eyes often turned toward the south, toward town, toward home. At night, when the wind stirred through the trees and the world went dim, Cooper would curl into his blanket and dream. In his dreams, Laura was laughing again. He could smell the baby powder in Eli's nursery, hear the lullaby Laura hummed when she thought no one was listening. He'd dream of resting his head beside the crib, one eye always half open, guarding a tiny life. But each morning he awoke to silence and the rustle of leaves in a barn that was not home. The night settled over Clearwater Ridge like a heavy quilt, muffling the world beneath the steady rhythm of an autumn drizzle. The town lay mostly asleep, its quiet broken only by the occasional sweep of wind stirring the leaves on cracked sidewalks. Above the clouds hung thick and low, their bellies swollen with more rain, cloaking the moon and casting the streets in a dim, uncertain glow. A faint, woodsy chill crept through the trees and into the bones of every silent house. In a modest home on Willow Avenue, the lights inside had dimmed hours ago. The soft hum of a baby monitor buzzed steadily on the side table in the living room next to a cup of cold chamomile tea, and a knitting needle stuck through an unfinished scarf of pale green yarn. Nora Jennings, a woman of 68 with fine white hair pulled neatly into a bun and skin marked gently by time, lay still in her favorite chair. Her body had slumped quietly just minutes earlier, one slippered foot dangling off the ottoman, her arm draped lifelessly over the side. The only witness to her collapse was the ticking clock on the wall and the faint mechanical rotation of a baby mobile turning in the room down the hall. Nora had been feeling slightly off that evening. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle fatigue she'd attributed to a long day helping her daughter with the baby. She had cooked a soft dinner for herself but forgot to eat more than a few bites, distracted by the dishes, the baby's schedule, and the thought of Laura working late at the hospital. The weariness built gradually, imperceptibly, until her blood sugar dropped below safe levels. There had been no warning, no cry for help. Just a gentle dimming of the world, then darkness. Down the hallway, Eli, barely 7 months old, lay swaddled in his crib. He slept deeply, arms curled loosely by his sides, his breath steady and soft. A faint draft filtered through the window frame, fluttering the edge of the curtain. The room was peaceful, unaware. No one heard the quiet click and whine coming from below. In the basement behind a closed door, the old electrical box buzzed with a persistent vibration. Weeks earlier, Laura had mentioned to the landlord that one of the circuits tripped occasionally, but it had been dismissed as harmless. Tonight, however, a frayed wire connected to a forgotten dehumidifier finally gave way. A spark snapped in the dark landing in a shallow pile of dust and cardboard near the wall. For several minutes, there was nothing but the faint smell of warm plastic. Then a dull orange glow began to pulse like a hidden ember, slowly breathing to life. At the Jennings household, no one stirred. Nora remained motionless, her body slowly cooling in the armchair. Eli slept on. And in the basement the fire began to grow. But across town, far beyond the tree-lined roads, and into the open outskirts of Clearwater Ridge another presence awoke. Cooper lay curled on an old woolen blanket inside the corner stall of the barn. Rain tapped steadily on the tin roof overhead, a slow rhythm that usually lulled him to sleep. But tonight, something was wrong. The 6-year-old golden retriever, his golden coat slightly matted from the earlier storm, lifted his head with sudden alertness. His ears pricked forward. His nose twitched. There was no sound, no clear scent, and yet his body tensed as though someone had called his name through the wind. He stood slowly, muscles taut, gaze fixed beyond the wooden wall of the barn. The rain thickened outside, now drumming harder against the roof and spilling in rivulets down the slats of the door. Cooper padded toward the entrance, paws soft against the straw. He paused at the threshold, the scent of wet earth and pine sharp in his nose. Then he took a step into the night. Something deep inside his chest, older than memory, stirred like an instinct long dormant. He didn't bark. He didn't run, not yet. But his eyes, wide and searching, looked out into the darkness, as if expecting to see something. There was only the rain. And yet Cooper remained at the edge of the barn, unmoving, listening to a silence filled with something only he could feel, a pull, a ripple in the stillness that made his heart pound without cause. He stood there for a long time, drenched but alert, the storm washing over him in sheets. Whatever had woken him, whatever whispered through the chill wind and unsettled his sleep, was not done yet. Something was wrong. The rain had not relented. It lashed across the open fields with a steady urgency, turning the roads into rivers and the earth into mud. Trees bent under the force of the wind, as if bowing to some invisible storm god sweeping over Clearwater Ridge. The barn, once a quiet shelter nestled between the orchard rows, now echoed with the pounding of hooves, just one pair light but determined. Cooper ran. The 6-year-old golden retriever moved like a blur, each stride strong and purposeful despite the slick earth. His golden coat, once soft and gleaming, was soaked and darkened by rain, clinging to his lean frame. Mud sprayed behind him as his paws slammed the ground in rhythm. There was no doubt, no hesitation. Something primal had awakened inside him, a force older than language or training. He wasn't just running toward a place. He was running home. The journey from the farm to town was nearly 4 miles, but Cooper had traveled it before, when Laura first brought him to Dennis's place when she used to visit on Sundays before Eli was born. The trail was faint but familiar through a broken fence across a shallow ravine, under the old train bridge, long out of use, and finally along the narrow side road that led to Willow Avenue. Tonight it was treacherous. The ravine had flooded. The side road was covered in fallen branches. Headlights flashed in the distance as cars veered past him. A horn blared. He dodged instinctively, leaping into tall grass and re-emerging seconds later unscathed but soaked through. Somewhere near mile 3, a fox darted across the path ahead. A younger dog might have stopped chased. Cooper didn't. His eyes, narrowed and fierce, never left the road. His breath came in hot clouds as the cold rain chilled his body, but he didn't slow. His heartbeat pulsed not with fear but with urgency. Meanwhile, back on Willow Avenue, the fire in the Jennings basement continued its silent growth. The wall panels had begun to smolder. Smoke, dark and oily, crept under the door leading to the first floor, rolling outward like a tide into the hallway. Eli still lay asleep in the crib, and Nora, still unconscious, remained slumped in the armchair, her face pale and unmoving. At exactly 10:41 p.m., Cooper reached the backyard. He didn't hesitate. The gate was partially open, a lucky break, or perhaps fate. He pushed through, sprinted across the slick grass, and bounded up the porch steps. The back door, left unlatched by Nora earlier that evening, gave way with a push of his shoulder. The moment Cooper entered, the smell hit him like a wall. Smoke. Not overwhelming yet, but growing. His ears went flat. He paused only long enough to orient himself before dashing down the hallway, paws slipping slightly on the hardwood. He reached Eli's nursery in seconds. The door had been left ajar. Inside, the smoke was visible now, curling just above the floor. The air was thick, warm, tinged with the acrid scent of burning plastic. Cooper whined once, then pushed into the room. Eli stirred as Cooper approached, eyelids fluttering, the first signs of discomfort registering on his small, round face. Cooper stood on his hind legs, placing his paws on the edge of the crib. He leaned down, gripped the edge of the soft cotton blanket in his teeth, and began to pull. Eli made a soft sound, half cry, half breath, but didn't wake fully. Cooper continued slowly, carefully dragging the blanket and child toward the edge of the crib. He shifted his grip, gently nudging the baby forward, until Eli slid close enough for Cooper to grasp the fabric securely. Once the infant was secure in the folds of the blanket and nestled across Cooper's chest, the dog turned and padded back down the hallway, ears low, breath shallow. The smoke had thickened. His eyes watered. He moved faster. He reached the living room. The armchair. She was still there. Nora hadn't moved an inch. Her head lay tilted against the cushion, her hand still limp over the armrest. A soft wheeze escaped her lips, barely audible. But she was breathing. Cooper set the blanket down at the door carefully, then turned back toward the chair. He stared for a long second. Then he barked once, sharp and loud. No response. He barked again. Nothing. Then he made a decision. Cooper turned and bolted toward the front door, claws scraping wood. He jumped against the panel, pawing it, then ran to the window. The curtains were open just enough for a sliver of porch light to frame the glass. He leapt up, front paws thudding against the pane, and barked again, frantic, short, rapid bursts. Nothing. He turned sharply, spun on his heels, and raced out through the back again. He crossed the lawn, turned left at the gate, and sprinted down the narrow hedge path separating the Jennings property from the neighbors. The neighboring house belonged to Henry Marsh, a retired auto mechanic in his early 80s. Short, stout, and always in a brown cardigan and work boots. Henry had a crooked nose, a dry wit, and a habit of waking up at least once a night to check the thermostat. A widower for over 15 years, Henry didn't talk much, but he had eyes like a hawk, and ears tuned to every creak of his old house. Tonight, as he sipped warm cider from a chipped mug, Henry heard the barking. It wasn't just barking, it was urgent, desperate. He shuffled to the front window, squinting into the dark. Through the rain, a golden blur bounded across his porch and barked straight at his door. Cooper Henry murmured, recognizing the dog instantly. Cooper barked again, turned in a circle, then ran toward the Jennings house, paused and barked again, clearly trying to summon him. Henry set the mug down and reached for his raincoat. The rain was beginning to slow, falling in gentler drops that softened the sharp patter on rooftops and leaves. The wind, once howling, now whispered through the trees, as if the storm itself were taking a breath. But inside Henry Marsh's home, the stillness had been shattered by the sound of frantic barking. Henry, 74 years old, wasn't a man easily startled. His years as a firefighter in Portland had taught him how to keep calm under pressure. He was short and broad-shouldered with deep creases around his eyes and a silver beard that gave him the look of a retired sea captain. Though arthritis had slowed his movements, his mind remained sharp and his instincts sharper. He opened the door cautiously, the porch light flickering as wind swept past him and froze. Standing in the dim yellow glow was Cooper, his coat matted with rain, his chest heaving. Between his front legs, partially wrapped in a damp blanket, was a baby, Eli crying softly, face flushed and eyes barely open. Henry's breath caught. "Oh, Lord," he muttered. Without another word, he reached down, scooping the baby into his arms. Eli whimpered but didn't resist. His skin was warm, too warm, and his breaths came in short gasps. Henry could smell the faint scent of smoke clinging to the blanket, and in that instant he knew something terrible had happened. He didn't need more explanation. Cooper barked once, then took off across the lawn. Henry, despite the pain in his knees, followed. As they rounded the hedge that bordered the Jennings property, Henry's old instincts surged. Smoke curled visibly through the kitchen window, faint but unmistakable. The house was still dark, no lights, no alarm. Henry handed Eli's bundled form gently into the arms of his tenant, a young nurse named Rita Morgan, who had come running from her garage apartment when she heard the commotion. Rita, in her late 20s with curly black hair and an always tired expression, was dressed in scrub bottoms and a hoodie. She had moved to Clearwater Ridge 6 months ago, after working emergency shifts in the city left her burned out. Quiet but capable, she kept to herself, but the moment she saw the baby, her training kicked in. "I've got him," she said, cradling Eli carefully. "Go." Henry nodded, turned and limped up the porch steps after Cooper. The back door was open, the same door Cooper had entered through. Smoke had thickened now, wafting out into the air. Henry reached into his coat, pulled out a small LED flashlight he kept on hand, and stepped inside. Cooper was already in the living room, standing beside the motionless form of Nora Jennings. Henry, crouched beside her, checked for a pulse. It was faint, but there. "She's alive," he whispered. "Good boy, Cooper." He tugged his phone from his pocket, dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "House fire. 244. Willow Avenue, 2 adults, infants out, 1 unconscious. Smoke may be electrical." The dispatcher's voice was calm but efficient. Henry gave directions, then slipped the phone into his pocket and turned back to Nora. The room was getting warmer. He grabbed the blanket from the couch, used it to lift her under the arms. His back screamed in protest, but he gritted his teeth and dragged her toward the door. Cooper stayed close, barking once more when Henry stumbled. "Easy, easy, I've got her," Henry said, coughing through the thickening haze. They made it to the porch just as the distant whine of sirens rose over the trees. Within minutes, the scene was a blur of motion and red lights. A fire engine pulled up first, its headlights cutting through the rain. EMTs followed in a second vehicle, jumping out with oxygen tanks and stretchers. Paramedic Jules Alvarez, a wiry man in his 40s with a weather-beaten face and eyes like flint, took charge. He was quick, methodical, and unshakably calm, traits earned from years on the job. He crouched beside Nora, checking vitals, nodding at Henry. "She's lucky," Jules said. "Another 10 minutes, maybe not." Nearby, Rita was already handing Eli to a younger EMT named Jordan, a fresh recruit, barely 22, with bright red hair and a nervous but eager demeanor. Jordan took the baby gently, then looked down at Cooper, who stood quietly, soaked to the bone but unflinching. "Is this the dog that pulled him out?" Jordan asked in awe. "He's the reason any of them are still breathing," Henry said hoarsely. Jules looked over. "Then someone better make sure that dog gets seen too." Rita was already wrapping a dry towel around Cooper's back, murmuring gently, as if he were one of her patients. "You're okay now, buddy. You're safe." 10 minutes later, Laura came flying into the scene, her hospital badge still clipped to her collar. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she ran, eyes wide and wild. "Eli," she cried. "Mom!" She saw the ambulance, the stretcher, the EMTs, and then she saw Cooper, standing quietly near the porch, soaked and weary, but alive. Laura froze, tears springing to her eyes. She rushed to him, dropping to her knees, arms flung around his neck. Cooper didn't resist. He leaned into her eyes, closing as if the entire weight of the night had finally landed in that moment of contact. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, sobbing. "You came back. You saved them." Cooper didn't need to respond. His body said it all. The sun broke through the clouds that morning for the first time in nearly a week, scattering golden light across the rooftops of Clearwater Ridge, and turning the dew-soaked grass of the town square into a field of diamonds. There was a kind of hush in the air, not from silence, but from reverence, as though the whole town knew it was about to witness something rare and sacred. Banners flapped gently from lamp-posts, each one bearing the name Cooper, in bold letters with a paw print etched beneath it. Children clutched paper flags, parents sipped coffee from paper cups, and townsfolk who hadn't stepped out for years now stood side by side in lawn chairs, umbrellas resting at their sides just in case the skies changed their mind again. On the temporary stage erected near the gazebo Mayor, Edith Cranley adjusted her glasses and checked her notes once more. In her late 60s, with short silver curls and a blazer tailored one decade too late, Edith had served as Clearwater Ridge's mayor for nearly 14 years. Stern but fair, she was known for her dry wit, fierce advocacy for local schools, and a habit of quoting Abraham Lincoln during zoning meetings. Today, however, her usual formality had softened. Standing just off stage was Laura Jennings, dressed in a pale blue blouse and navy slacks, her hair pinned neatly behind her ears. Her eyes still showed the exhaustion of that long night, but something new shimmered behind them, gratitude perhaps, or peace. She held Eli in her arms, bundled in a little jacket and cap now, fully recovered and gnawing happily on a pacifier. And beside her, seated calmly with a red bandana tied gently around his neck, was Cooper. His golden coat had been brushed to a soft sheen, though a few leaves still clung stubbornly to his tail. His eyes, large and deep as ever, scanned the crowd with quiet alertness, not out of anxiety but out of instinct. He sat tall but relaxed, tail resting across the stage planks, unaware that today was for him. Behind Laura stood Rita Morgan, the nurse who had helped in the moment of chaos, her arms folded across her chest, and a rare smile pulling at her lips. She wore her hospital ID like armor, but for once there was nothing clinical in her expression. Next to her stood Henry Marsh in his best flannel and jeans, holding his cane like a sword. Despite a persistent cough, he stood straighter than usual, chin high. Mayor Cranley stepped to the podium. There are moments, she began, her voice amplified through a modest PA system, when a community is reminded what it truly values. In Clearwater Ridge, we pride ourselves on neighborly spirit, quiet, strength, and loyalty. But sometimes, just sometimes, it takes a creature without words to show us what those values really mean. Applause rippled through the crowd. Cooper blinked ears, flicking forward. Last week, during a night of storm and smoke, a dog named Cooper ran miles through the dark to save his family. He pulled a baby from a burning home. He barked until a neighbor awoke and helped save a grandmother's life. He did not do it for applause. He did not do it for reward. He did it because he knew who he loved, and he knew they were in danger. Laura's arms tightened around Eli. Henry wiped at his eye with a knuckle. Today, the mayor continued, "We award Cooper the Clearwater Medal of Courage, something we've never given before and may never give again." A young woman stepped forward with a small velvet box. Inside was a bronze medallion inscribed with Cooper's name attached to a deep blue ribbon. Laura knelt beside Cooper, gently slipping the ribbon over his head. The dog looked up at her as though trying to understand why her hands trembled. "I'm so sorry I sent you away," Laura whispered, her voice caught in her throat. "I thought I couldn't handle more, but I didn't realize I needed you most of all." Tears tracked silently down her cheeks as she kissed the side of his face. Cooper leaned into her, his eyes warm, his body still. There was no pride in his stance, no awareness of honor, just that quiet, patient presence that had always defined him. The crowd erupted into cheers. Children reached toward the stage. Someone tossed rose petals. Camera shutters clicked. But through it all, Cooper remained calm, his eyes drifting across the people, past the banners toward the edge of the park, where something small and unexpected moved beneath a bench. A tiny squirrel with a puffed-up gray tail and an oddly confident gait trotted through the crowd and leapt onto the stage. It darted past the mayor's heels, past Laura's knee, and stopped beside Cooper's front paw. The dog turned his head slightly, recognizing the scent even before he saw it. Lucky. The squirrel had grown bolder in the weeks since Cooper rescued it on the farm. Though it now spent much of its time in the trees near the Jennings' backyard, it still wandered back to nap beside Cooper's dog bed or nibble seeds from Laura's porch. Eli had even begun reaching out to it, giggling when its tail flicked across his tiny toes. Lucky now climbed onto Cooper's shoulder and sat there, tail curled like a banner in the breeze. The crowd went silent for a second, stunned. Then laughter, applause, and a few delighted shouts broke through the hush. From the back of the audience, a child called out, "It's like a movie." Henry chuckled. "No kid," he muttered. "It's better than that." And there, under the noon sun, with a medal on his chest and a squirrel on his back, Cooper lay down beside Eli's stroller and closed his eyes. Not out of fatigue, but peace. His job was done. His family was safe. Sometimes the miracles we pray for do not arrive with lightning and thunder. They come on quiet paws through the rain, guided not by words, but by love. Cooper didn't need to speak to remind us of something sacred, that loyalty, courage, and sacrifice are not learned behaviors, but gifts placed within us by something greater, by God Himself. In a world full of noise, it is often the silent acts of love that echo the loudest. So let this story remind us to never underestimate the quiet heroes among us, be they animal or human, and to always believe that even in the darkest hour God can send help in the most unexpected form. A dog, a neighbor, a small voice in your heart urging you to move. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below with the word Amen if you believe that miracles still happen. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of courage and faith. And may God bless you and your loved ones, because you never know when your Cooper might come running through the rain.